The left quotes the Constitution the way an atheist quotes scripture. It's not because they have any loyalty or love for it. It's because it's a standard which by they think they can judge you. They can restrict your actions. They can restrict your power by referencing it. But when they're in power, all of a sudden, they don't have the same reference for it anymore. All of a sudden, it's just a document that was written by rich white slave-owning oppressors that needs to be drastically altered in order to save our democracy. That's what happens when you try to take the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and put it on the firm foundation of nothing but secular humanism.
Ladies and gentlemen, did you see the last podcast we had with the great Nick Freitas? If you hadn't, you got to go back and listen to that. This is going to be a continuation of what we were talking about. I was asking Nick, who you may know has been a Green Beret. He's been in combat. He has spoken all over the country on so many great issues, including Christianity, including the family, including economics and politics. He was for 10 years a delegate in the House of Delegates in Virginia. He's now moved out of Virginia. We can't tell you where he is. It's a secret. He's got about 4 million followers for good reason. He's got so many great insights in these short videos on Instagram, almost 2 million followers, 1.5 million followers on YouTube. He's on X as well. And he has a podcast called Making the Argument with Nick Freitas. Freitas. You need to check him out. Nick, it's always great having you on the program. And I want you to tell our audience about the fact that you and your wife, Tina, are kind of like in ministry together now. Does she, when you guys go out, does she speak as well?
She does. I had to talk her into it initially. So my wife's not so introverted that she doesn't like to go out or do it. It just, whereas I get energized by being around people, she gets drained over time, right? So every once in a while she'll look at me and she goes, Nick, I'm done peopling, right? But
you and I married the same woman, by the way. Yeah. Opposites attract, but they also attack sometimes, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was I was doing this thing for Young America's Foundation, and I was talking about biblical masculinity. And as I was doing this, I'm like, babe, what they really need is they also need to talk on biblical femininity. And at first she was like, well, you just want me to talk about like the problems of modern feminism? I'm like, no, everybody's doing that. They need something to pursue, not just something to avoid. They need something to aspire to, not just something to beware of. And so she put together this speech on biblical femininity where she was talking about Proverbs 31. And what's interesting is I do something similar when I talk about biblical masculinity, because I like to point out that men and women have been lied to in completely different ways.
Tell us how.
And here's what I mean by that. Like for men are told that if it's from the left, if the critique is from the left, you're being told that you're toxic, that you're horrible, that you're violent, that you're the source of all the world's ills. And the solution to that is for you to become more feminine and docile and to let women take charge, right? That's the left-wing lie. There's another lie men are told, and it's in response to that left-wing lie. And that's the lie that, no, you're strong and you're powerful, and you need to use your strength and power to dominate over women and to get what you want and to have a nice car and to sleep around, and that's your proper role. Both of those are lies in different directions. So how have women been lied to in different directions? Well, the left-wing lie to women is the polar opposite of the right-wing lie, right? It's you need to go be a girl boss, right? Like, we hate masculinity for men, but we love it for women, right? You need to go out there and you need to conquer and be in charge and be a CEO, and you need
so
to
they can say things like this:
"You're fired."
Right.
Yes. Yeah, that's
Okay.
what makes you a strong, powerful, independent woman is you don't need no man. Okay, but then there's an element of the right that is also lied to women. And what they've told women is, no, what you need to aspire to be is the 1950s trad wife, right? You just need to, be barefoot, pregnant, in a sundress, making sourdough. Now, listen, I got nothing against sundresses, sourdoughs, or pregnancy. I think those are all wonderful things. But the idea that you're going to say that this is the personification of what it is to be a good woman, that's also a lie. Now, in both cases, there's a remedy. It's called biblical masculinity and biblical femininity. And so Tina went through this process of explaining what the Proverbs 31 woman represents and how she is strong and she is entrepreneurial and she is resourceful and she uses these things to build up her family, and her family calls her blessed. And then she also talks about Jael, right? It's the story in what Judges, where Jael puts a tent peg through what is it, a Amalekite? I can't remember. I think some sort of Canaanite.
A bad
king.
guy.
Yeah, bad guy, right? Like kills him with a tent peg, right? Nailed it. And so she again gets rid of this myth that women are supposed to be strong and powerful, independent from men. But she also confronts this myth that your role is just to be Susie Homemaker. What your role is to be is this Proverbs 31 woman who is incredibly, again, powerful, intellectual, entrepreneurial, all of it, but also very nurturing. And I try to do the same thing for men, right? So I'm like, no, you're not supposed to be passive and docile. You're supposed to be strong. You're supposed to be capable. These various traits, masculine traits, God has given you for a purpose. But if you use if you embrace those traits, and then you use them only to enrich yourself or to dominate other people or to sleep around, well, now you're betraying the very reason those traits were created in the first place. You're supposed to develop them in order to serve God, in order to serve your family, in order to protect your community and your country. Those are the ways that you actually utilize those things. And oh, by the way, those are very enriching. Those are the very things that give men a sense of meaning and purpose and place in the world. And so both of us try to talk about this. And then we also do a Q&A on marriage. Young America's Foundation had me come out to Texas A&M, and I thought for sure they're going to want us to talk about politics. It was exclusively about biblical marriage. And they had us talking about it at a time where there was a big trans rally that was going on at Texas A&M, or was about to happen. So there really is a hunger for this among our youth.
Yes.
They really want to learn more. It is shocking to me. 5 years ago, when I went to go speak on a college campus, it was all about economics, taxes, immigration, politics, campaigns. Now when I go, 60% of the questions will be about faith, about family, about masculinity, about femininity, about raising kids. And so I'm actually really encouraged that we've got we talk all about how young people don't want to get married and young people don't want to do this, and young people don't want to. Well, yeah, they've been taught for the last 20 years to despise these things. And yet we have this remnant, this ever-growing remnant of young men and young women that are rejecting the narrative they've been told, but they are desperately looking for guidance, and they don't want to just be told, they want to be shown. They want to see, whoever's talking about this, they want to see that you've lived it out in difficult circumstances and it's worked. And that's encouraging to see.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, notice that when the left says the biblical view of masculinity or femininity or marriage is wrong, they're implying there's an objective standard by which they can say that's wrong, but they don't have that objective standard in their worldview. This is just their opinion. So when they come out and say, well, you're a toxic man or whatever, you ought to say, by what standard are you claiming that?
Yeah.
Because you would have to steal from God in order to say we're wrong, and you'd have to show us from some sort of revelation that we're wrong to say, here's the proper way a man should be and a proper way a woman should be. If there is no God, there's no proper. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. Everything's just a matter of opinion. So the left often tries to bludgeon us with a objective worldview that they don't have in their worldview. And we need to point that out.
They cannot logically sustain objective morality within an atheistic worldview.
You can't.
They can't do it. If you're going to appeal to secular humanism as the source of your morality, well, then it's not that you just can't say that a particular type of marriage is wrong or right. You can't say slavery is wrong. You can't say rape is wrong. You can't say anything. You can say you don't prefer it. But then I'm just going to ask the question, why not? Maybe you were just wired differently. Maybe this other person was wired in a different way. And again, it is not a sustainable worldview. Nobody can live the way that they are insisting we live, to include themselves, which is why there is so much depression, which is why there is so much, turmoil and divorce and everything else. It's because this isn't sustainable. And more and more, I've gotten into the habit when I go to like Turning Point and I do tabling events, I will just ask the question, okay, but what if there is a God? What if the God of the Bible is true? Like, you're willing to consider all of these other things. You're willing to consider that a man can become a woman, that a woman can become a man. You're willing to consider all of these things. Why aren't you willing to consider that maybe this objective truth you keep appealing to requires an objective moral law giver in order to intellectually sustain itself. And some are willing to listen, and others just, they want to move along to the next argument. And it just goes back to this whole idea of the very first problem was this promise that we were given by Satan that said, your eyes will be open and you will be like God. And we have been fighting with that temptation ever since. And the closer we get to realizing it, the more death, destruction, and misery we experience.
That's right. The first lie. Has God really said, ladies and gentlemen, there's been a war on reality since the beginning. And let me just mention again, our book is coming out in September. I know that seems a long way off, but it really helps to order this in advance. It helps more people see the book. So if you would, order the paperback version of The War on Reality, Recovering Truth in a World That Celebrates Lies. That's what me and my co-author, the great Phoenix Hayes. By the way, there's a lot of snark in this book too, because Phoenix, my co-author, is a great writer, and she's sarcastic, kind of like I am. And my friend here, the great Nick Freitas, has some great snark in so many of his videos. In fact, in the previous show, Nick, I was going through some topics. I wanted you to give us one thing you wish people would know about a particular topic. Let's talk about Marxism for just a second. And before we do, I want to show a clip of how LGBTQ people seem to side with the Taliban and the gays for Gaza thing. Here is a clip from the great Nick Freitas on that.
Did you all see this? I can safely say that nothing surprises me anymore. This is a picture of a bunch of young women who apparently got some makeup on and then presumably drove their cars downtown in order to march in an anti-Israeli protest with a Taliban flag. Because there is nothing the Taliban appreciates more than strong, independent women in makeup without face coverings marching in public.
Okay, Nick, you and I know where this insanity comes from. It's Marxism. It's oppressed oppressor. Unpack that a little bit and explain what you wish people like this really knew.
Oh, gosh. All right. The thing that you need to understand about Marxism is that it doesn't operate as an economic philosophy. It operates like a religion. It has its heaven, it has its hell, it has its sinners, it has its saints, the whole deal. It operates like a religion. And what Marx is essentially promising is that one day, if we just follow everything that he's telling us to do, we'll wind up with a classless, stateless society with so much economic abundance that we'll all just live in utopia. And every time it's been attempted, it's led to totalitarianism, authoritarianism, famine, death, starvation, like you name it. Why?
Outside of that, though, Nick.
Outside of that, great idea, right? Whenever people say, well, communism is a great idea in theory. No, it isn't. It sucks in theory too, right? Here's the best. So that's what I want people to know is that it is a philosophy which is inherently atheistic and rejects it rejects human nature itself. Which is why they're always talking about creating a new socialist man, which is why it ends up being totalitarian. It is totalitarian by necessity because it is asking you to reject the very fundamentals of what it means to be human and the way that we're motivated and the way that we operate. I wish people would know that because if they did, they would understand why this never works and will never work. It's not that it just hasn't been tried correctly or had the right people in charge. Here's a test that I give people. I actually offered this to one of my colleagues in the General Assembly who is a socialist. I said, look, if you would like to live as a socialist in a capitalist country, you are welcome to. You can go get a bunch of friends. You can buy some property. You can own it in kind. You can develop different. You can develop different resources that you use to manufacture goods, to provide services. You can own it all in common. You can have no individual private property. You can do all of that. And not only will I not stop you, I will fight to lower your taxes so that you can do what you want to do. I only have two rules. You can't force me to subsidize it, and you can't force me to join you. That's it. Mm-hmm. Live as you want. I don't care. Live as you want. And that's not good enough for them. They have to compel me to contribute to that system. And the way I know this is because the closest any of this has ever operated successfully would probably be like a kibbutz, but a kibbutz is purely voluntary. You can leave at any time. Can you leave a communist country at any time? Can you leave a socialist country at any time?
They have to build walls to keep people in.
Yes. So
Yes.
it is inherently, it is a rejection of human nature. It is a rejection of God's morality. And it requires, by necessity, totalitarianism and coercion to work. It cannot function as a purely voluntary entity. To the extent that it has attempted it through voluntary communes, they usually break down within 3 to 5 years. And the reason why is because the people that are lazy recognize that they can get something for nothing, and then they wear out and they exploit the people that are actually willing to work. Because the moral foundation, the supposed moral foundation of communism is from each according to their ability, to each according to their needs. And that sounds nice. In fact, if you look at the book of Acts, they talk about something like that. But that was a purely voluntary, purely voluntary, group at a very, very unique time within church history. If you actually try to make that the morality of your society, right? And keep in mind, that wasn't the morality of that group. The morality of that group was God's word. It was God reigning. If you try to take a secular humanist society and make the fundamental principle by which you operate from each according to their abilities, to each according to their need, what you've done is you've incentivized need and you've disincentivized ability. Because the more ability I have, the more you take from me. The more needs I profess to possess, you give to me. And so you've created this perverse incentive structure where it pays to be needy and it doesn't pay to have capabilities. And that's why it will always fail. There is no system where it succeeds in large. It might work out fine in your family, right? But it doesn't work for society at large. And if people would just understand that, we could stop trying to go down this path thinking that if we only had more altruistic people in charge, we'd be better off.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, when was the last time you washed a rental car? You never have, and you never will. Why? Because it's not yours. You don't care. If you have no ownership in something, chances are eventually you're going to lose interest in it. I think that's one reason why private housing usually turns out to be better than public housing. Yeah. And so you're absolutely right, Nick. I find that people if you don't understand human nature, if you think people are inherently good and don't need any incentive to work, you're going to come up with kind of these perverse, like we could just put a law in place that says that people have to live this way and it's going to succeed. It's not the way it works.
I dealt with this all the time in the legislature where I would have my same colleagues, my Democrat colleagues would come on and they would, the same people that believes you can't legislate morality. By the way, it's all we legislate.
That's right.
Every
That's
single
all we can
law
do.
is predicated upon a moral premise, period, the end. Every
That's
single
right.
one. But then they would come up and they would give moral arguments. And I would get into this all the time where they would say, oh, my bill is going to help working families and it's going to help lift people out of poverty. And it's going to help giving them a fighting chance to one day own a home. And I would say, yeah, that's nice. But what does your bill do? Because your bill doesn't do any of that. I'm looking at the language in your bill right now, and it doesn't do any of the things that you just said. Those are aspirational claims that you hope your bill will achieve. But here's what your bill actually does. It makes it illegal for me to hire someone for under $13 an hour. That's it. You think that this is going to create additional wealth for people making minimum wage. I think it's going to disincentivize people for hiring low-skilled labor because you've made it more expensive. Now, I know that I'm correct through the incentive structure that is being created within the law. So explain to me how I'm wrong. Explain to me how you're the good guy and I'm the bad guy. You don't get to legislate reality. You don't get to we used to say this all the time. We don't legislate intentions. We write laws. And laws will be interpreted by people, by police officers, by courts, and they may have different interpretations from what you intended. People will respond to the incentive structures you have created. And what you just created was an environment where if I need a job and I'm willing to work for $12 an hour and somebody else has a job, but all they can afford to pay me is $12 an hour, it is now illegal for us to engage in that voluntarily mutually beneficial transaction. Why? Because you say so.
Mm-hmm.
What is moral or nice or kind or compassionate about that?
Rush Limbaugh used to ask the question, why don't you just make the minimum wage $100 an hour?
Oh, why not $1 million? In fact, if you don't make it $1 million an hour, you're a racist. Like 2 million, right? If it's all just arbitrary, if we can just legislate prosperity, well, then that's what we should do.
Why don't we just have a bill that does that?
Everyone's rich and happy.
That's right.
It's a law. Must be.
All right, let's go back now to the video that kicked this off. How does Marxism create these illogical bedfellows, LGBTQ, aligning with Gaza, or gays for Gaza, or these women aligning with the Taliban? What is the psychology behind that?
That's critical theory, or a lot of it's critical theory. So if you look at the Frankfurt School and Herbert Marcuse, critical theory is a way of interpreting reality where you essentially say that all of the systems that you have, whether they be economic, political, social, systems of thought even, this is where you get into deconstruction and Derrida and things like that. These are all set up by the ruling class to keep themselves in power at the expense of the marginalized population. And so now all of a sudden, when we talk about meritocracy, it's like, oh, no, this isn't a universally moral thing. This is just a term you use to support your privileged position. And so through that, they say that everybody falls into a category of either oppressor or oppressed. You are oppressed if you're someone that is not benefiting from the system, or you fall within the intersectional hierarchy of oppression, right? And you're an oppressor if you do benefit from the system, right? And it's not about your individual behavior, right? It's about whether or not the system helps you or hurts you. And what it does is it takes away all of your individual agency, if you think about it. It robs you of that. So how does that lend itself to what we kind of commonly refer to as the red-green alliance, right? The Marxists and the Islamists. Because Islamists and Marxists do not want the same thing. And yet, none other than Michael Foucault, right, the godfather of postmodernism, flew to Iran during the 1979 revolution and held it up as this wonderful demonstration of the future. How is that possible? How does that make sense? Well, the left, I'm going to talk about it in political terms, and I'll talk about it in religious terms. In political terms, the left and Islam have a common objective, which is to say they have a common enemy, and that's the West. The
Christianity
left
in particular.
Rejects.
Yes, Christianity in particular.
Yeah, the left fundamentally rejects the Christian origins of the West. It fundamentally rejects capitalism. It fundamentally rejects property rights. It fundamentally rejects so much of the West that it wants to destroy it and replace it with something else. But because it looks at everything as oppressor as oppressed, well, then all the oppressed peoples are allies. And they see they tend to see Muslim countries or Middle Eastern countries as having been oppressed by colonialism or capitalism or the American hegemon or Israel or whatever else it is. So they're oppressed, so they're allies. Islam also has objectives. They want the global caliphate, right? They look at society, so they break down society into one of two things as well. You're either a believer or you're an infidel, right? So you fit into one of those two categories. And their overall objective is to spread Islam across the globe, which in and of itself, right, if they had peaceful means of doing that, if they wanted to convince you of it, that would be one thing. But Islam from the very beginning has spread through the sword. And when they are powerful, they use the sword overtly. And when they are weaker, they use other mechanisms in order to advance Islamic objectives. So the left sees Islam as a partner against the West. And the left is arrogant enough to believe that, well, once all of these Islamists get over to, the UK or the United States, well, they'll recognize that what they really wanted was secular humanism and Marxism. Islam understands that that's what the left thinks and thinks the left are a bunch of useful idiots. So in the same way that the communists and Lenin used to talk about useful idiots that could be beneficial to advancing communism, Islam sees the left and the West as useful idiots for advancing Islam because they're weak, and they will invite them in and they will welcome them. And you will see this with like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib. They have no problem saying, oh yeah, gay pride marches, because they don't have sufficient power to shut it down. But in the first city in the United States, where they actually had a Muslim majority city council, they banned all the pride flags. Now, I don't think that was a bad decision personally, but it goes to show that the left is arrogant enough to presume that because they have a common enemy, they have common end states. Islam is wise enough to understand that the left is easily manipulated, that they have a common enemy, and that once that common enemy is defeated, the left will not possess the sufficient strength to defeat them.
How do these people on the left, though, miss the obvious contradiction that if they were to say to go to Gaza, they'd be the first people thrown off a building. Why would they support that kind of government, which is essentially what they're doing, this Red-Green Alliance?
Oh, no. They're not supporting that kind of government. They're supporting opposition to Israel in the United States.
I know, but that would be a worse situation than the current situation. Why do you think they...
Oh, but Frank, no, that's just happening over there. Once they realize how wonderful the woke Marxists are, well, they'll have no choice but to adopt a similar ideology. I mean, this is a different manifestation. Let's talk about how the right has been arrogant toward like the Middle East. The right was arrogant toward the Middle East when it came to Iraq and Afghanistan. They really thought that, well, once we get over there and we defeat Saddam Hussein and we defeat the Taliban and we set up a parliamentary democracy where you have freedom and girls can go to school and you have liberal democracy, they will be so overwhelmed with how wonderful and successful it is that they won't think of doing anything else. And if you believe in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you believe that we're nothing but time plus chance plus matter, and then we're all just homo economicus, and as long as things are good, well, then that's all that animates or motivates us. Well, then sure, that's a logical conclusion. But we're not. We do seek for deeper identity, meaning, and purpose. And you can find that in good and true and wholesome ways, and you can find it in pretty terrible ways. But the bottom line is that if you found that way, if your identity is made up of your belief in Islam, well, then you don't want liberal democracy. You don't want parliamentary democracy. You don't want those things. You want Islam. And you want Islam to be the governing authority and the socially animating authority throughout your civilization. And that's not compatible with the left. But the left is arrogant enough, and the overall success of the West over the last several hundred years has fed into this arrogance that we're the ones that have got it all figured out, because look at all our amazing technology. Look at our quality of life. Look at our standard of living. It is so superior to the rest of the world. Who wouldn't want what we have to offer? What's amazing is the left actually rejected the very things that made that standard of living possible, the sort of social cohesion and high trust societies possible. It wants the benefits without recognizing the author of it. And now they're trying to team with Islam in order to destroy it. And again, if they're successful, they'll be the first ones. They'll be the first ones, thrown in jail afterwards. And how do I know that? Go look at what happened in 1979 in Iran. The original revolution in Iran was not exclusively religious. It wasn't even predominantly religious. It was labor unions. It was left-wing organizations. It was Marxist agitators who then teamed with the Ayatollah and the religious community. And the religious community was happy to team with the labor unions and the Marxists.
And the college students. Yeah.
And college students.
Yep.
And then when the Ayatollah took power, what happened within 5 years? Those same agitators were put in jail, tortured, and thousands of them were executed. Why? They weren't useful anymore. They went from being useful idiots to just idiots. And Islam doesn't suffer those idiots.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, what Nick just said there, we had the great Bill Federer on several months ago talking about the history of Iran. And you remember he said exactly what Nick just said, that many of the college students and the trade unionists had kind of aligned with the Ayatollah. And on the invitation of Jimmy Carter, we allowed the Ayatollah to take over. And then the Ayatollah immediately began executing people who actually were partially responsible for bringing him to power. Mm-hmm. And that's why Nick just said it. They're useful idiots. And people don't know history, and they're doomed to repeat it then. So give us the one thing, Nick. I know you could probably list 50 things. The one thing you wish people would know about Islam here in America that they don't seem to understand.
If you think that the only reason that Islamic countries have a problem with the United States is because of a relationship to Israel, you don't understand Islam and you don't understand the history of it. Islam has a global objective. They're not idiots. They understand that they do not possess the military and economic power in order to push that global objective. And so they are utilizing other methods in order to do so. But it is their objective. The reason we know that if they had sufficient military or economic power to spread Islam through the sword is because every time they did, they did. They don't right now, and so they're happy to team with the left. But you need to understand that Islam's problem with the United States is not that we have bases in the Middle East. One of the first major conflicts the United States ever had with the foreign powers with the Barbary pirate states, and we were wondering why they were boarding our ships and selling our sailors into slavery. And the answer was very simple: because you're infidels, and our prophet says we can't. So understand that is the objective of Islam. Global domination is the objective, and they will pursue whatever methods are practical for succeeding with that. But if you think that Islam is compatible with the West or peaceful coexistence with Christianity, let me just say something right now. It isn't when they're in the majority. A Muslim can live peacefully in a Christian country, right? A Christian does not get to live peacefully with the same rights in a Muslim country. That's just the reality. And I realize that our liberal sensibilities are offended by that, but it is the reality, and we didn't choose it, they chose it. And so you're either going to contend with reality as it exists, or you're going to put your head in the sand all the way up to the point where you're not permitted to anymore.
This is why, ladies and gentlemen, as we pointed out on this program before, the term Islamophobia is a bogus term, because Islam's not a race, it's an ideology. There are people who are Muslims from every racial and ethnic group out there. This is a political/religious ideology that wants to impose itself all over the world. That's not a phobia. That's just 1,400 years of history. That's called reading a history book, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. And we can suppress that. We can deny that. We can look the other way and say, oh, that's uncomfortable. Sorry, it's the truth. Okay? Doesn't mean that every Muslim that we run into believes this. It just turns out that when Muslims get a majority, 99 times out of 10, as we say in my home state of New Jersey, it turns out that they impose Sharia law. And
we did a podcast on this a while back where we just said, is Islam compatible with the United States?
No.
And we came up with like 6 or 7 different criteria. We talked about freedom of speech. We talked about civil liberties. We talked about representative government. We talked about religious freedom. We talked about terrorism. We talked about cousin marriage, right? And then we pulled up a map of the world and we showed, we went through the different stats on all of these things. And I said, okay, you have roughly 50 Muslim majority countries in the world. Do any of these countries, have any of them chosen to organize themselves in such a way politically or socially or theologically in a way that would bear any resemblance to a country in the West? And the answer is no. Okay, me pointing this out is not phobia. Phobia is an irrational fear or hatred of something. I don't fear anything except God. But I will tell you right now, there is nothing irrational about pointing out that Islam and the United States, as we understand it, are not compatible. And to your point, does that mean that an individual Muslim cannot be a patriotic American? No, they can be. I know some. I know some who call themselves Muslim and I believe are wholeheartedly patriotic Americans. Now, we could debate on whether or not that makes them good Muslims. If they don't want to replace the Constitution with Sharia law,
right?
We could debate that. But we're not talking about individuals, as you stated. We're talking about an ideology. And we should be free to be able to analyze and compare ideologies in order to determine compatibility. And when we find out that they're not compatible, then it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to invite that ideology in order to remake your own country, because they do not believe, again, when they have a critical mass, they do not believe in assimilation. That's a violation of their overall religious objective.
All right, last 2 topics I want to get from you, Nick. What is the one thing you wish people would know about the uniqueness of the United States government/constitution?
It was, first of all, it would never have arisen in anywhere but a Christian country.
Okay.
You have to understand that. The moral underpinning of our constitutional republic, and going beyond the Constitution to the Declaration of Independence, the moral underpinning is only possible within an understanding of Christianity as being the animating feature of that. Because without Christianity, if you're just appealing to classical liberalism or you're just appealing to traditionalism, it's not going to provide the moral framework that would lead Thomas Jefferson to say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We say this now, and it's a foregone conclusion because of American dominance in the world. That was a truly radical idea at that particular time. And so you have to understand the Christian underpinnings of it all. Because if you remove Christianity and you try to keep the Constitution, it isn't going to work. And the way we can see this happening right now, because when you look at how the left treats the Constitution, my wife said this once and I thought it was brilliant. She goes, the left quotes the Constitution the way an atheist quotes scripture. It's not because they have any loyalty or love for it. It's because it's a standard whichby they think they can judge you. They can restrict your actions. They can restrict your power by referencing it. But when they're in power, all of a sudden, they don't have the same reference for it anymore. All of a sudden, it's just a document that was written by rich, white, slave-owning oppressors that needs to be drastically altered in order to save our democracy. That's what happens when you try to take the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and put it on the firm foundation of nothing but secular humanism. It erodes and it eats itself because it no longer has the animating feature which gave it power and authority. And I wish people would understand that insofar as the United States ceases to be a Christian nation in the sense that we recognize, not because we're a Christian theocracy, but a Christian nation in the sense that is the animating feature of our laws and our way of life, then the Constitution cannot protect you.
This is why I keep saying James Madison, it was John Adams who said, as we said in the last program, our Constitution is made for only a holy, religious, and moral people. It is inadequate to govern any other. If you don't have moral people that are grounded in right and wrong beyond themselves from God's nature, you can put all the laws in place. What we're going to wind up with is the nanny state, which we probably already have. I was just told by an attorney recently, actually a tax attorney, Nick, that the IRS code is about 30 times as long as the Bible.
Yeah.
The IRS, just the IRS code. Forget about all the other criminal
federal
law.
Regulations, I think, is 77,000 pages.
Yeah, we already are in the nanny state, ladies and gentlemen. All right, last topic, Nick. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, this is the great Nick Freitas. I mean, isn't this fun? I mean, I just get to ask him one question and he dumps his wisdom on us.
I know I'm very, very short with my answers online, but then you get at me on a podcast and all of a sudden I'm filibustering.
No, you're not filibustering, man. You're unpacking it more deeply so people can go. Now you have books. You have the man book. What do you have?
Yeah, the book I've just written is called The Man Book, and you can pretty much find it anywhere. But what it is it's like 52 lessons that I've learned through life, being a man, being a soldier, being a husband, being a father. And it's just stuff that I think every man should know. And it's everything from how to defend your faith to how to properly cook a steak. Spoiler alert, anything above medium rare is a culinary felony.
That's right.
And here's my favorite one. How to successfully argue with your wife, which led everybody to believe, it's a Christian book.
To say don't. Don't.
That's actually what I'll do a spoiler alert. But one of the things I tell people is the worst piece of advice that unhappy old men give to new men is to never argue with your wife. I fully advocate for the opposite. You should be arguing and contending with your wife, but there's a proper way to do it. I learned it the hard way, and so I explain it in that chapter.
All right, you got to give us that's too much of a tease. You got to give us one insight on that, and then I'll give you the last topic. Give us one insight on how to argue with your wife.
With your wife is to treat her like a child, and more specifically, it's to treat her like a petulant child. Now, she has an obligation as well, and I get into that in that chapter. But I tell people the moment you give up having those discussions with your wife, you actually lose respect for each other in a very, very significant way that is very likely to eventually lead to divorce or infidelity or some other distraction away from your marriage. I want to contend with my wife when we disagree. Why? Because the purpose is not to defeat my wife in an argument. The purpose is for the both of us, who are now one flesh, according to Scripture, to be confident on what the truth is and how we should respond to it. And so there are times where I have had to yield and admit that she was right. There are times where, get this, guys, there are times where she has yielded and admitted that I was right. And there's a reason why that works. It's because when both of you are first dedicated to Christ, there is a source of moral law that both of you can appeal to that is outside of yourselves. So I don't dominate over my wife as the head of my household, right? But I do lead. And lead means when we don't agree, we have to take time to come together to figure out how we can agree or to figure out how we're going to move forward. Because if marriage is forever and there's going to be disagreements, then how you actually adjudicate those disagreements matters. And I can tell you right now, if you do it wrong, it will make your marriage hell. And if you do it right, you will be more powerful in your marriage than you can possibly imagine.
By the way, Nick just did a 15-minute video. I just watched that yesterday on why is the man the head of the house.
Yeah.
And so we're going to put that in the show notes too, friends, right here. So you got to check out Nick on Instagram, X, YouTube. Where else, by the way?
Oh gosh, Facebook.
You're everywhere. Okay.
Yeah, all the social media platforms.
All right, good. Okay, here's the last question, last topic I want to get your insights on. Other than it being true, what is the one thing you wish people in our country would understand about Christianity that they don't understand?
I always get choked up.
It's okay. Men can cry. Go ahead.
Only under special circumstance. I have a chapter on that. Every worldview I know, every political philosophy, every religion, every individual I have ever talked to is trying to find a source for identity and meaning and purpose. And all of them uphold love and justice as fundamental moral goods, love and justice. And so they will look at Christianity and they will criticize the problem of evil, or they will ask, how would a loving God do this? Or how could a loving God do that? And I look at it and I just say, if you would just sit down for a moment and understand why things happen the way they did in Scripture, that everything from creation to the garden, I talk to all these people, these secular humanists who value their freedom from God above all else. And it's like, well, how could a loving God, why would a loving God even put the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden if it could be the source of such pain and suffering? And it's like, because love and justice demanded it. How do you genuinely love someone if you have no other option? Mm-hmm. So what did God do? God created this perfect environment where we had community with each other. We had community with God. We had meaning and purpose and identity, and we had all of it. And then in order to make it true and genuine, because he wanted us to have some degree of agency within his sovereign will, he creates the perfect environment and says, there's just this one thing. There's just this one rule. Don't break this rule because you'll die. And we broke it. Mm. And at that point, God could have said, I did my best. I gave you everything. I did my best. You're just done. But he didn't. He didn't. And then people will say, well, then, why do people get punished, or why do bad things happen? Or why couldn't God just say, oh, never mind, it's okay? Because that wouldn't be justice. See, it wouldn't be love. It wouldn't be genuine love and community if he didn't give you the option to choose something other than to love him and have community with him. And it wouldn't be justice if he just said, never mind, it's all okay. So what is the one thing? What is the one thing God could do if he truly loved you, if he truly loved us, in order to once again reestablish family and community with us? To uphold love, he steps into the world. To uphold justice, he takes on the price for us. He couldn't ignore it, or otherwise he wouldn't be just. He couldn't give it to someone else to pay because that wouldn't be just. He had to take it. He was the only one that could do it. And if you understand the truest meaning of love and justice, then you recognize in that moment the truth and the beauty of what he had to do. And I feel like the only proper response to that is amazing gratitude and repentance. Because ultimately what he wants is not just to save us. He wrote out this whole story. He wrote out this that we get to be a part of. And he wants that community. He wanted the garden. And he's now given us a way to get back to it. And when you come to the full understanding, not just of how logically consistent that is, but how much it speaks to the human desires that we all have to have identity, meaning, purpose, love, justice, and community. I don't know how you don't sit in absolute awe of that.
Mm. But as you pointed out, most people don't know it. And hopefully now they do. Certainly the people listening to this anyway. Well said, my friend. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, when the gospel's understood properly, it's something that most of us, if we're thinking properly, would say, that's beautiful. Why wouldn't we want that to be true? That the God of the universe comes to this earth to save us from the evil we've done? Why wouldn't you want that to be true? That's why, ladies and gentlemen, you should ask people, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? If they hesitate or say no, it's not a head problem, it's a heart problem. But I suspect part of the heart problem is they really don't know what Christianity is. Yep. They just think it's a cosmic killjoy religion trying to prevent them from doing what they really want to do, when in fact God is offering us eternal love and fellowship. Nick, you're a treasure. I mean that, brother. I know this is the first time we've really spoken, but I admire everything you're doing, and I know so many millions of others do as well. So keep doing what you're doing. And for people that want Nick to come to their church or their conference, we're going to put all that in the show notes. And please subscribe to his Instagram page, his YouTube channel. I do. I hope you will as well. Any final words for us, brother?
No, Frank, I got to tell you, you've been a blessing to my family, and you didn't even know it, because a while back there, I had really dove into Christian apologetics, and I really admired this one apologist who really let a lot of us down. I'll put it that way, and I won't elaborate. And I always knew that I follow God, not a man. I follow God, not a Christian apologist. But I really wanted to once again dig into that, because that intellectual side of the faith is so important. There's a reason why God commands you to love him with your soul, your strength, your heart, and your mind. And I found your page, and I found the work that you were doing and the way that you were living your life. And it's been a huge blessing to me and my family. And so thank you for what you do and continue to do.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate that. I know that people can let us down. The Lord never will. And remember the question, ladies and gentlemen, when people complain about hypocrisy, you simply need to ask them, when somebody plays Beethoven poorly, who do you blame? You don't blame Beethoven. So when we don't play Jesus properly, don't blame Jesus. He's our Savior. No man is except Jesus. All right, friends, it's been great being with you. Make sure you check out Nick wherever he is online. Pray for what he's doing, and his wife, Tina. And thanks for being with us. Lord willing, we'll see you here next time. God bless.
If you're looking for solid answers to life's biggest questions, don't miss the latest episode of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeart, OnePlace, and Podchaser. Tune in, discover the truth, and share it with someone who needs it. Let's keep spreading the truth together.